The heart of pygeoapi is the configuration file that comes with it. All the information that we need to change, such as the port, the metadata, or even to add a new resources, has to be done in the YAML file. If you have installed pygeoapi, you can follow along. If you have not, please pause this video and check out other videos about installing it via GitHub or via Docker. In this video, I will be using the GitHub installation that I have done on my machine. Now, this is the YAML file that I was talking to you about. On a high level, this file contains 4 different types of categories in which more data is available. First is server, second is logging, then metadata and resources. In this particular video, we will be taking a deep look at the server. Now, if you want to learn more about server, you can go inside docs.pygeoapi.io and look for the configuration tab. Now, server provides directives on binding and high level tuning. This means the information that will go inside the server will help pygeoapi to understand how exactly server should be created. The very basic thing that you can do is change the host and port, and similarly the URL. Now we will start by making changes into these things. Now I will not change anything in the pygeoapi config file, but I will create a copy of it with the name example config.yaml, and this can be any name. So now let's start with changing the port to something like 5050. Now that I have changed the port, I will go to my terminal and I will start a new terminal. From here, I will make sure that I am in my environment, and then I will make sure that I have both of my variables exported. The one that talks about the configuration file and one that talks about the OpenAPI file. If you have not done that, you can simply go to pygeoapi.io and copy these 2 lines of code. And here is the file name that I have given, example config.yaml. Alright, I will copy this, paste it over here, and then I will generate the OpenAPI document. Now that it's generated, I can simply do pygeoapi serve. And this will start the server at port 5050. And there you go. You can see that my server is running. The next thing that we can change is the MIME type and encoding. For now, we will keep them as it is, but you can explore more about it in the documentation itself. Next we have is a language. This is important one because if you want to create your pygeoapi instance in another language, it will allow you to do that. For example, the default pygeoapi master comes with English as well as French. And you can see that if you scroll down inside any of the metadata or resources, you will see that everything will have an English as well as the French version written. If I scroll down more and go inside resources, you will see the same thing happening over here as well. So this is how you can add n number of languages and the representation of the text that you want instead of the English text. Next we have is gzip. By default it is false, but you can make it true, which will allow pygeoapi to export the data in a gzip format. Now let us try to do that. I will simply copy this and I will paste it over here. It's already here, so I will simply change it to true. Okay. Now in order to make these changes workable, I will have to stop my server, create a OpenAPI spec document one more time, and then serve it. Now to see it working, what we will do is we will go inside our collection, and from HTML we will switch to JSON, and we can see the JSON object. Now here I can also change it to gzip, and this will download the .gz file. Next setting that we can change is the course policy. We can make it true to support the course and enable the course on our server. Then we have is a pretty print. By default it is true, and you will see the use of it when I try to do f is equal to JSON. And since I have a extension installed on my Chrome, I will open an incognito window and you will see that my data is written in a pretty way. But if you don't want to do that for some reason, you can definitely make it false. stop the server, create the OpenAPI documentation one more time and run it again. Now if I go to my incognito and run this, you will see that it is wrapped in a single line. So this is how pretty print works. Next we have is limit. By setting limit, you are essentially limiting the number of items it should return in any response. By default it is 10, but if we change it to something like 2 and restart the server, now if I go inside any collection such as this observation and browse, you will see that I'll only get 2 values out of it. There you go. But if I change it to something like 5 and if I restart my server one more time, you will see that now I am getting by default 5 values. So this is how you can set the limit. Next we have is templates. Templates is an amazing thing which will allow you to change the face of your pygeoapi server. The one that we are looking at right now is a default pygeoapi HTML template. But you are not only bound to use this. You can definitely create your own template. If you are interested into understanding how to create it, we will have a separate video about that. But for now, you can simply go to pygeoapi folder and inside template, you will see all the templates available, and inside static, you will see all the CSS and images that we are using for that template. This is the base template, and if we make any change into this template, such as let's say if we try to put a name such as let's say my company's name, and now in order to see this, we don't just have to restart the server, but we will have to build our pygeoapi instance, because remember that this is inside the pygeoapi package itself. So we are not making any changes in the YAML file, because if we would have made any change in the YAML file, we could have just simply refreshed the application or restarted the application. But in this case, we are making the change in the pygeoapi package. That means now in order to see this change, I will have to do python 3 setup.py install. And now if I serve my pygeoapi instance one more time, I will see that change appearing over here. Obviously this is not looking very pretty, but this is how we will do it. Next thing we can change in the configuration is the default map setting of base map. For example, by default pygeoapi uses leaflet and it uses this basic OSM as a base map, but we are not only bound with that, we can definitely use other base map. So in this case, we will try to use some another base map. So I will simply head over to OpenLayers example and I will just pick up any XYZ URL. So if I go to XYZ, there is this S3 URL available. Alright, let's try to use this. There is a URL available. I will simply copy this URL and I will replace this URL with that. There you go. And we can make changes in the attribution as well. So for example, I will make changes such as server maintained by RG. And now if I generate the document one more time and serve this, you will see that inside collection and for each map, now we are using this S3 map rather than using the basic OSM map. So this is how you can change it. Then we have OGC schema location. So this is not compulsory, but if you want to get all these schemas from OpenGIS and make some changes into it, you can download that file and then you can give the path. Then we have manager, which essentially talks about OGC API processors, and it serves as a database where entire information about OGC API processes jobs is maintained. We will have a greater look at this when we talk about OGC API processes and how to create processes and execute them in pygeoapi. Depending upon at what time you are looking at this video, there is also one more thing which is recently added in pygeoapi, that is admin level access. So if I, instead of going into stable, if I go to the latest version, you will see that under server we have this new thing known as admin. By default it is false, but if you make it as true, you will see an admin API which will enable you to see all this configuration file in your UI itself. So let's try to see how does it look like. For me it is by default true. That means if I go to my pygeoapi homepage, you will see this admin available over here, and when I will click on it, and it will take you to a new page where a config YAML file is available. Now you can obviously get that config YAML file in a JSON format as well, which can become pretty handy, but you will also see this UI where entire config.yaml file is available. Maybe in the future we will also get an option to edit the data from here, but of course that means we will also have to be sure about authentication and authorization. pygeoapi clearly dictates that authorization and authentication is out of scope for pygeoapi, because at the end of the day pygeoapi is a simply OGC API implementation written in Python. So these are all changes that we can do inside the server configuration of pygeoapi. In the next video, we will have a look at logging, metadata and resources. Thank you.